Famous musicians, Oscar-winning actors, legendary sports figures, and even war heroes all have one thing in common. It all must come to an end. I'm your host, Ed Doyle, and these are stories of fame and fate. Innocent, inspiring, compassionate, joyous, and endearing. These are just some of the words that we use to describe a young child. Filled with optimism and in awe of the world around them, young children make the world fresh for us. They give us meaning and can make most of us happy like nothing else can. Most of us. But tragically, not all of us. On June 6, 1978, a baby girl was born in Los Angeles, California. Bright-eyed and full of life and joy, she would bring love into the hearts of millions, but tragically would be taken from us, oh, too soon. This is the story of Judith Barsi's fame and fate. In the autumn of 1956, as Soviet troops closed the border of Hungary and began to surround Budapest, some 180,000 Hungarians, including Judith Barsi and Maria Varakovacs, neither of whom knew each other at the time, would escape through holes in the Iron Curtain. After Joseph's escape from Hungary, he would flee to France, where he would marry a fellow Hungarian refugee named Clara. Together, Joseph and Clara would have a son and a daughter. But even though they escaped the Soviet occupation to freedom, they still struggled to survive. Joseph was ashamed of his own childhood in Hungary. Having had his parents separate as a child, he was called the bastard son, at a time where families never separated. He had low self-esteem. He found it difficult to find work to support his young family because of it. He would later develop a drinking problem that often cost him jobs and friends. It was told by acquaintances of Joseph that it was then, during those hard times, that he started to verbally and physically abuse his wife Clara, hitting her often in drunken fits of rage. Joseph and Clara would move to New York in 1964, but his drinking and his abuse worsened. He now began to also abuse his son Barna, both emotionally and physically. Clara, having finally had enough, would take her children and flee to Arizona, but Joseph followed them to try to patch things up with his family. Still drinking and not working, one night Joseph would throw a cast iron frying pan at Clara in a drunken rage. Finally, Clara filed for divorce, and Joseph would move to California to try and find a new life. It was in California that two very different people would meet. Maria, who grew up in a college town in Hungary, and Joseph, who was from a poor, tough industrial area in Hungary, would eventually meet in a Los Angeles restaurant that was frequented by emigres. Maria was a waitress at that restaurant, and she would watch Joseph with his head tipped down over his drinks as he would pay for each round with $100 bills. Maria saw in Joseph a kind of kindred spirit. They were both from Hungary, and they both had escaped the Soviet occupation. She also saw, by the way he paid for his drinks, that he was a man that was not poor and could probably give her a secure life in the United States. Not long after they met, the two of them married, and soon they would have a daughter named Judith Eva Barsi. It was very early in the marriage that trouble began. An overly possessive Joseph would forbid Maria from working. The family was in bad shape financially, as he would often be out of work as a plumber and would be drunk instead of supporting his wife and daughter. The young family eventually would have to go on welfare in order to eat and pay the rent. Maria Barsi herself had grand dreams of being an actress in Hollywood, but with a horrible family life, a demeaning husband, and no real way to find a road to fame, Maria instead would begin to groom her young daughter Judith into becoming a star. Maria would teach her posture and poise, and Judith's politeness was that of an angel, said one of the Barsi neighbors. At 5 years old, Judith, the tiny angel, as many referred to her, and her mother Maria would be skating at the San Fernando Valley skating rink, where unknown to them, a production crew was filming a television commercial. Judith was mistaken for a 3-year-old by the crew because of her tiny stature, and they immediately fell in love with her. Signed by Ruth Hanson, the agent that would manage Judith's career, Judith would get her first starring role advertising Donald Duck orange juice. Maria would continue to take Judith to auditions, and Judith's charm and being the adorable little pixie that she was would land her roles in over 70 commercials, television, and movie roles through her career. Judith would come into the living rooms of America in commercials for McDonald's, Campbell's Soup, Jif Peanut Butter, Lay's Potato Chips, and many, many more. Some of her television roles would include spots on Cheers, The Love Boat, Cagney and Lacey, Growing Pains, Punky Brewster, and more. Judith would also appear in film and made-for-TV movies. Kids Don't Tell, Do You Remember Love, Destination America, Jaws, The Revenge, and in the role that she will be remembered for forever as the voice of Ducky in A Land Before Time, where her words, "Yep, yep, yep," will be forever etched in our hearts. As Judith's career progressed, her father, Joseph Barsi, became more and more abusive. In one incident, according to a neighbor, Maria bought Judith a special kite. And as she was in the yard playing with it one day, her father came out, grabbed it from Judith. Judith cried hysterically, "You're going to break it on me." Joseph grabbed the kite, looked at Maria and said, "See, she's a spoiled brat that won't share her toys." And he took it and broke it into pieces in front of her. Over the years, the neighbors and family friends said that most of the abuse was verbal, but very disturbing and life-threatening. He was crazy with his threats. They would be all over the place. At one moment, he would say he was going to kill Maria. And then seconds later, he would change his mind and say instead he was going to kill Judith and himself just so Maria could suffer. A friend and fellow plumber, Peter Kivlin, said that if Joseph had said once, he said 100 times that he was going to kill Maria. Trying to calm Joseph down, Peter would say to him, "But if you kill her, what will happen to the little one?" Joseph coldly stared at him and said, "Well, then I'll have to kill her too." Judith, though she was becoming one of the most sought-after child actors, really only loved kids stuff. She was a darling little girl that loved her dolls and loved to ride her bicycle. In fact, whenever one of Judith's commercials or television appearances was about to air, Maria would make them popcorn so the two of them could sit on the couch together to watch. But Judith really would rather have just gone outside to play. Her favorite colors were pink and purple, and she absolutely loved sunflowers. Like so many children her age, she loved the Smurfs and adored Care Bears. Judith loved to swim and to play in her best friend's sprinkler. Finally, in December of 1986, Maria Barsi filed a complaint with the police against Joseph for his threats to kill her time and time again over the past 5 years. After a short investigation, though, the police found no proof of physical violence, so no charges were filed. Joseph's drinking became worse, and according to friends, became increasingly abusive, jealous, and paranoid. He would be arrested on 3 separate occasions for drunk driving. Maria had told a friend that just as Judith and she were leaving to film the Jaws movie, that Joseph threatened Judith with a knife, telling her that if she did not come back, that he would find her and cut her throat. Maria had said that Joseph dragged her into the garage and showed her a can of gasoline and told her that he would burn down the house if she and Judith left. The abuse started to take its toll on little Judith, as she would begin to start acting out in strange ways. At one point, she pulled out all of her eyelashes and all of one of her cat's whiskers. Then, during the audition for All Dogs Go to Heaven, Judith had a complete breakdown in front of Ruth Hansen, her agent. Hansen suggested to Maria that she take Judith to see a child psychiatrist, which Maria in fact did. Later, Hansen had said that when she had talked to the psychiatrist, that he said, "Ruth, this child has extreme verbal, mental, and emotional problems, and that I must report this to Child Services." A spokesman for Child Services later said that the agency had a plan of action, but Hansen was quoted as saying that Maria had told her that they were doing nothing for them and that she would have to handle it herself. Maria would rent an apartment where she and Judith would spend all day, but they would return each night to their home and to Joseph. When asked why she did not make the move permanent, Maria replied that she did not want to lose the beautiful home that Judith's career was able to buy for the family. Perhaps that was the reason. Or could it have been out of fear of what Joseph would do if they did not come home each night? Judith's final role would be the voice for Anne Marie in the film All Dogs Go to Heaven, but sadly, Judith would not live to see the premiere. Judith was last seen smiling and laughing and riding her bike on the morning of Monday, July 25th, 1988. Later that day, Judith was scheduled for an appointment with Hanna-Barbera Productions, but she would never arrive. Her agent Hansen called Joseph to find out why they weren't at the appointment, and was told by him that a car had come for them and taken them away. Los Angeles Police Detective Sandra Palmer stated that she believes that on that Monday, Joseph had walked into Judith's bedroom and shot her in the head while she lay in her bed next to her pink TV that he had bought for her, then chased a frantic Maria into the hallway and shot her in the head also. She said that he had called Hansen a day later, saying that he planned to move out of the home for good, but needed time to say goodbye to his little girl. After the call, Joseph would cover Judith and Maria's dead bodies with gasoline and set them ablaze. He then went into the garage and took his own life with a shot to the head. In September of 1988, an LA County advisory panel stated that the Department of Children's Services dropped its investigation into the Barsi family prematurely because Maria had asked them to close the case. It was also stated that the social worker handling the case had 27 more cases than what was even considered a full workload. The commissioner recommended that the department become more sensitive to the impact of domestic violence on children and to develop clearer guidelines for closing a case. On August 9th, Judith and Maria were buried here in Forest Lawn, Hollywood Hills Cemetery in Los Angeles. You will find her marker in Sheltering Hills, lot 5049, space number 2, which reads, Judith Eva Barsi, our concrete angel, with her immortal phrase, "Yep, Yep, yep.